Three of the foods that Normandy is famous for are apples, cream, and calvados, or apple brandy. These days when people think of chicken Normandy, they usually think of the dish with sectioned chicken pieces braised in a sauce of calvados, apples, and cream. But Normandy is also famous for camembert cheese, and there's another chicken Normandy that's a whole chicken with a force-meat stuffing that includes camembert. This recipe fuses these two ideas together into a single dish. You'll get crisp skin on the chicken and an intriguing stuffing that goes nicely with the sauce.
We're going to begin by making the stuffing. I've got a couple of chicken livers here from whole chickens and hearts. You can use just livers if that's what you've got. You can even leave it out, but it won't be the same. I know some people are squeamish about organ meats. Believe me, it won't taste like organ meat when you're done here. It's just going to provide that earthy note in the background. And kind of the same thing for the camembert cheese. A lot of people really hate this cheese. They think it smells like old gym socks. Okay, if you really hate it, you can use cream cheese. Again, you're not going to have the traditional taste, but you got to go with what you like. That's the most important thing. We're going to need several apples. This is one of them that's going to go into this. Got a couple of shallots here, some olive oil. Now earlier, a couple of recipes ago, I made up the seasoning mix for the chicken Provençal, and this is about a teaspoon and a half of that same seasoning mix. This goes really nicely in the stuffing, but you don't have to use it. Also some dried thyme and some fresh parsley. So I'm going to turn the camera off for a minute, and peel the shallots and the apple, and we'll get cooking. I've added about 3/4 of an ounce, about 22 grams of olive oil to a hot pan, and it's important to do the apples first. Don't reverse them and do the liver and shallot first and then the apple. After about 5 minutes, you see some browning on the apples. Now I'm going to add the shallots. By the way, the heat is on medium. It's on fairly high. It's on 8 out of 10. So we're going to cook the shallots now for another couple of minutes before we add the organ meat to this. And here we are on 2 minutes. Now I'm going to add the chicken liver and heart. And we're just going to cook these through. Don't forget, they're going to get cooked plenty more inside the bird as part of the stuffing. So it's not like you have to be super careful about cooking these all the way through. I've weighed out 60 grams of breadcrumbs into the food processor bowl. I'm adding the chicken organ meat, shallots, apples, all that. This is the camembert cheese. I've cut most of the rind off, but not all of it, and a little bit of rind. Don't make it all rind. Of course, if you're using cream cheese, it's not an issue at all. Here's the Provençal seasoning mix, the thyme. I'm not being exact here. You need about 3 tablespoons of fresh parsley. Now we're going to process this, and then we're going to mix it by hand with the ground meat. At this point, you need to taste this, and there'll be a little bit of experience involved. I know from just tasting it right now, it's going to need salt and a little black pepper. Exactly how much you add is personal preference and experience, like I said. Now I have 90 grams of ground chicken. You can also use ground pork for this. Ground pork is actually more traditional, although I find that kind of bizarre because you're making a chicken dish, but whatever. And now I'm going to mix this by hand. And this is what you want to end up with. A little ball like this that's going to get stuffed inside the chicken just before you cook it. This can get refrigerated. You can do this part the day before if you like. These are the spices that are going to be ground up to make the coating. We have 2 teaspoons of 4 mixed peppercorns. That's white, black, pink, and green. A few cloves, about 1/4 of a teaspoon, a little bit more. This is what star anise looks like. We're only going to use a couple of little, I don't know what to call them, even petals, I suppose, off of this, and a teaspoon of thyme, teaspoon of paprika, and a tablespoon of coarse salt. Seems like a lot, but it's going to work out just fine in the end. I'll load it into the electric spice mill. Into the cup of the stick blender, I've already weighed out the vegetable oil. I have the rest of the apple that was, the first part of it was used in making the stuffing. The rest of this is going to go in here. It's about 60 or 70 grams. The exact amount isn't really that critical, about half an apple. There's the lemon juice, the spices that were just ground, and the cream. It's about 60 mils of cream. And now we puree. You have the chicken here. I'm going to cut off the wingtips. You don't really have to do this. It's just, there's no point in it. They're culinary wasteland, as the expression goes.
The chicken has been rinsed well inside and out and then patted dry with a paper towel.
Have the mixture here. I'm going to pour roughly half of it down the middle of the cavity here. Reach inside, kind of smear it around a little bit. Now we've got the ball of stuffing we made earlier. That's going to go down into the chicken. It should be just about the right amount for this size chicken. Okay. Now we do a little quick truss here. And through the magic of video editing, there it is. It's done. Now we're going to take the rest of this and paint over it thusly. Don't worry about the bottom, the back, because it's going to be discarded anyway. It's not part of the final dish. And then finally, a little dusting of flour over the top, just a little bit. If you have this kind of shaker, it makes things a lot easier. And now finally, with a sharp knife, poke a few holes here and there, especially in here. This little pocket here will let some of the fat run out when it's cooking. Okay, now this is all ready. It's going to go in the oven. And an hour and 40 minutes goes by, comes out of the oven. I'm going to tent it lightly with foil here and just let it rest. So after it's cooled, you cut the breast portions and the quarters, the legs and thighs off of it, and you're left with a carcass like this, and the stuffing will slip out just like this as a whole piece. It looks like a brain or something.
Don't throw out the carcass. You're going to use it in making the sauce.
Now we begin preparing the sauce. I've got 120 grams of onion, 2 apples, green apples. I've already cored them and peeled them. A lot of people leave the peel on these and it just becomes part of the dish. It's up to you. There's always that little bit of toughness and stringiness in the peel. I prefer taking the peel off, but you know, it's up to you. I've got 150 grams or milliliters here of Applejack or Calvados apple brandy. You can use regular brandy. The flavor will not be nearly as good. You'll lose a lot of the character if you just substitute regular brandy or cognac. But, you know, again, if you can't get Calvados, that's what you got to use. I've got apple cider. That's the cloudy kind. In case you're not sure, don't get the clear kind. Apple juice is too sweet, won't work. And 150 milliliters of light cream and the herbs. These are the same herbs that I used in the chicken Provence. You could just use a teaspoon of dried thyme. That'll be okay. This is better. Now, into the pan. The other ingredient is 45 grams of butter. A lot of butter and cream in this dish. That's typical of Normandy. So we're going to bring this up to heat and begin cooking the apples. I'm going to section those apples while this butter's getting hot. The only other keys here is don't stir them around too often. Give them a stir once in a while. Make sure that you give them time to brown well, and also make sure that you use a pan that's just large enough to hold all of them in a single layer. Don't have them stacked up against each other because they won't brown. If they're not touching the pan, they're not going to brown. When you've got a reasonable amount of browning on the apples here, transfer them off to a bowl. Now we're going to put the onions in the pan. We're going to brown these quite well. I'm going to take this carcass, just kind of tear it apart, put it in the pan here. The carcass has been cooking for about 5 minutes. By the way, those onions cook for about 5 minutes too. So we've got about 5 minutes on the onions, about 5 minutes on the carcass. Now this is brown. Now I'm going to add the calvados to this. If you're doing this, you know, in front of guests and you want to show off, you can flambe this, put a match to this. It'll be a big fire. It'll look spectacular. It'll also burn off most of the alcohol. Personally, in this case, I think it destroys some of the flavor of the calvados, and I like a little alcohol flavor in this dish. It's still going to cook plenty anyway, but suit yourself. If you do flambe it, stay back, because this is a lot of alcohol. 150 milliliters of calvados will produce an enormous flame. Don't burn your eyebrows off. So we're going to reduce this down until it's almost a glaze before we continue. It's probably going to be about another 5 minutes here. And as I predicted, it's about 5 minutes has gone by. This is getting quite thick and syrupy. Now I'm going to add those herbs or thyme, whichever one you're using, and the apple cider. After you've brought it up to a simmer, begin counting a time. Like 5 to 10 minutes is enough at a slow simmer. Turn the heat down. It's been on 7 most of this time, 7 out of 10, so medium high. Now I'm going to turn it down to about 4. We really don't want to evaporate off these flavors. We just want to make sure that everything that can come out of those herbs and that meat goes into the liquid. So 5 to 10 minutes like this. I'm going to turn it back to, actually I'm going down to 3.5 out of 10, so it's on a fairly low heat now. Then you pass this through a sieve, rub it as much as you can to get as much of the solids through as possible. You add the cream to this gently, slowly, as you're whisking, to avoid the possibility of it curdling. Do it slow, slower than you saw me do it. And now you have to taste this and adjust the salt. It absolutely will need some salt and a little bit of cracked or freshly ground white pepper. Now you've arrived at the position you want to be in any restaurant. You've got the apples already cooked, you've got the sauce already made, you've got the chicken, you've got the stuffing that can be sliced into nice slices. All you have to do now is arrange it on a pan, stick it in an oven, like 220, really hot, with a fan circulation going, and you'll finish it off in about 10 minutes. It'll be all ready to go, nice and piping hot and finished. In a small baking dish like this, I've got the sauce laid on the bottom. Don't cover the chicken, skin won't crisp up. The stuffing, a couple of slices of the stuffing. Apples are going to get mixed in with the sauce after it comes out of the oven. So the apples will get warmed up in the hot sauce. Don't put the apples in now. This part gets stuck in the oven at 220 Celsius with the fan on.
The second volume of my cookbook is now available through Amazon and other booksellers. It covers the YouTube recipes from the last 8 months with more in-depth information. I received requests for the procedures on all recipes, and I've listened to you. Every recipe has step-by-step directions, and of course there are recipes that aren't on YouTube. But this is not just a recipe book. Far from it, as you can see from some of the topics scrolling by here. I'm certain that anyone who watches my channel and any serious cook will find this book a treasury of useful and new information you won't find anywhere else. If you want to know more about my adventures as a chef around the world and have some great laughs along the way, be sure to check out the video tour of my book, 40 Years in One Night. It's up on YouTube right now. Click the link.
Also look for my cocktail book, Cocktails of the South Pacific and Beyond, Advanced Mixology, available through Amazon online.